So we are recording. See, the thing that's the reason I paused there, because I really don't, I'm still figuring out this recording. I don't see anything that tells me for sure that we're recording, except I guess we're recording.
It shows us in the top corner that you're
Okay,
recording.
great. Okay, so we're recording. Yes, so it's hard for me to really tell. And I've got all these things, and I'm trying to keep, see, I have you guys over in the corner, but I'm trying to keep you out of the way, because what it does, it records my screen. So I got to be careful that we don't cover up what I'm trying to show everybody. That's another little bit of a challenge. But anyway, so what I'm going to do with this problem is I will come back if you guys have any, if you're not sure how to answer any of these questions when I'm done, we'll certainly go over them, but I'm going to show you how to do what I call the complete analysis of a problem like this, because they don't necessarily have to ask you the four questions that they ask you. They could ask you different questions. So I want you to be prepared and fully understand this model, so whatever they ask you, you'll be able to answer, okay? Pardon me. Ugh. So I'm going to jump over here and move you guys somewhere where you're out of the way. See? All right. Okay. So the first thing the easiest thing and the first thing you always want to do is determine which country has an absolute advantage. And that's simply understanding that these curves are production possibility curves showing each country's ability to produce wheat and cloth. So for example, if we look at country A, if they put all their resources into wheat, they can produce 100 units of wheat and 0 units of cloth. If they decide to put all their resources into cloth, they can produce 100 units of cloth and 0 units of wheat, and anything in between. Now, in this case, this is a linear production possibilities curve, so the opportunity cost is constant. Now, remember, I think I talked about, I might not have, probably, no, I didn't get to, that was in macro, so Grace knows, but you're going to see, concave shaped production possibility curves, and that is a curve where the opportunity cost is constantly changing. But for these, it's a little easier because they're linear. And the other thing that's helpful mathematically is understand that the opportunity cost on a model like this is the slope of the curve. So as you know from math, that if a curve is linear, the slope is constant. Therefore, the opportunity cost is constant. So we can easily compute that, because it's going to be the same no matter where country A or country B decides to produce on this curve. So the absolute advantage is who can produce the most of one or the other good. So we can easily see that country B has the absolute advantage in the production of cloth, because if they wanted to, they could produce 300 units of cloth, and the maximum that country A can produce is 100, right? Now, for wheat, it's very easy to see that neither country has an absolute advantage, because they both can only produce, or can produce up to 100. So they tie, right? It's a tie. So neither a country in terms of wheat has an absolute. So country B has the absolute advantage in cloth, okay? That's easy. Excuse me. I'm so sorry I have a cold, but it's just one of those things. Okay, so the key to the analysis of comparative advantage is understanding how to compute opportunity cost. And the way we do that is we think in terms of as country B goes down this curve. Actually, let me just see if I have I might not have it in here. I want to get just give me 1 second here, and I'm going to do something real quick to make this easier to see. Okay. All right. So as we move down this curve, country B is producing more cloth and having to give up the production of wheat in order to do it, right? They're gradually allocating more resources to cloth and less resources to wheat as they move down the curve from left to right, okay, until they get to a point where they're producing maximum cloth and zero wheat. So the opportunity cost for cloth is whatever they have to give up in wheat. And the opportunity, now as they move up, they're producing obviously more wheat. Let me scoot down, sorry. As they move up, they're producing more wheat at the expense of producing cloth, at the cost of producing cloth, right? Does everybody see that? Sure, easy, right? So we want to just make it simple and say, okay, what does country A have to give up in order to produce one more unit of cloth? So what does 1 unit of wheat cost them in cloth? Well, country A is easy, right? Easy peasy. It's 1 to 1, isn't it? 1 to 1. And, you know, they give up one unit of wheat for every unit they gain in cloth. So that's very simple. The opportunity cost for country A for 1 unit of wheat is 1 unit of cloth. Now, country B, since they can produce 3 times as much cloth as they can wheat, for every unit of wheat they give up, they're going to gain 3 units of cloth. Or for every 3 units of cloth they give up, they're going to gain 1 unit of wheat. So we can say 1 unit of wheat costs country B 3 units of cloth. Does that make sense? It's just basically a ratio, isn't it? Okay, so now we just simply look at who can produce wheat for the least cost, and that's country A. Country A only has to spend 1 unit of cloth per unit of wheat, and country B has to spend 3, so country A has the comparative advantage in the production of wheat. Now, from that, we can say that since country A has the comparative advantage, they're going to specialize in whatever they have a comparative advantage in, make more of that, and export it, sell it to, in this case, country B. This is a very simple two-country world we're talking about here, right? There's only 2 countries, A and B. Okay? So is everybody with me so far? Okay. Now, the key here is to make this number a 1, you know, so that you can compare, right? Because if you use 1 unit of wheat here and 2 units of wheat here, then it wouldn't be easy to compare the ratio, would it? So you want to make sure that you standardize it. So whatever you use for a country A, you want to use the same amount, and 1 is the easiest because, you know, this is just easiest, right? And so you can easily see which one can do it, can produce a wheat for the least cost in cloth. Okay. So now, country A, we're going to turn it around and say, okay, now we're going to look at what 1 unit of cloth cost, both of the countries. Well, once again, since country A is 1 to 1, that's easy enough because it's going to be 1 to 1. So 1 cloth is going to cost 1 wheat, whereas country B, 1 unit of cloth, as they produce more cloth, they're going to give up, as they produce 1 more unit of cloth, they're only going to have to give up 1/3 of, I'm sorry, am I talking about, okay, sorry. As they produce 1 more unit of cloth, which is going this way, they're going to have to give up 1/3 unit of wheat. For every unit of cloth, they only have to, it's only going to cost them 1/3 unit of wheat because 100 is 1/3 of 300. Okay. So does everybody see that?
Mhm.
So that just simply means that now country B is going to have the comparative advantage in cloth because cloth costs them less in wheat, 1/3 versus 1. And so country B is going to export what they have the comparative advantage in producing, which is cloth. So they'll export cloth. They'll specialize in cloth. They'll export cloth, and they'll import wheat. Okay. And I think that analysis, I believe, let's go back and check, answers more than answers whatever they're asking for the first. Okay, so A is which country has that absolute advantage? Yeah, we did that. Explain how you determined your answer. You simply say, well, country, let me make sure I say it right. I don't get it backwards. Country B can produce a maximum of 300 units of cloth, so their maximum for cloth is more than the maximum for country A. So that's why that country B has an absolute advantage, because if they wanted to, they could put all their resources into cloth and easily outproduce country A. Okay. So some kind of explanation along those lines. Which country has a comparative advantage? Now, here you want to focus on who has the lowest opportunity cost. If you're explaining why a country has a comparative advantage, the definition of comparative advantage is which country has the lowest opportunity cost. So you could say, well, whatever country, and in the first, let's see, they're asking about wheat and cloth. Okay, so we just did that, and you can just say that country A has the comparative advantage of wheat because their opportunity cost for producing wheat is lower than country B, and country B has the comparative advantage for producing cloth because their opportunity cost for producing cloth is lower than it is for country A. That's pretty much all you'd have to say there, okay? Because it's all about, it's all about opportunity cost. Okay, now with C, whoever, as I said before, whichever country has the comparative advantage, that's what they're going to specialize in, and they're going to import the other good, right? So whoever is going to import wheat is the country that has the comparative advantage in cloth, because they're going to export what they have the comparative advantage in and import what they're not as good at, okay? So whoever imports a wheat is going to be the country that exports cloth, and that is country B, right? So country B is going to export cloth and import wheat because country B has the comparative advantage in cloth. So that's how you'd answer C, okay? Does anybody have any questions up to question D?
What's the difference between A and B?
Okay, the difference is absolute advantage is different from comparative advantage. A country can have an absolute advantage, but not the comparative advantage. Okay? So both, let me jump back here. See, as you can see, neither country has a absolute advantage in the production of wheat, but one country does have the comparative advantage in the production of wheat, and that would be country A. It's also possible for a country to have the absolute advantage in both goods. Like if you had, for country B, if this was up to 110, so you could say, okay, well, they have an absolute advantage in both, but they still wouldn't have a comparative advantage in both. It's theoretically impossible for a country to have a comparative advantage in both. A comparative advantage is determined by opportunity cost. You're comparing their production of one good to the other good. Absolute advantage is just compare. It's just looking at who can produce the most. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Well, you know what would help you, and I don't know if I have it here or not. I might not have it on. Let me just look here for a second. I don't think I do. Let me just show you something real quick. Real quick, and you'll see more about what I'm talking about. If I go back here. It's cold, killing me. Let's see. Where are we? Okay, I want to show you something here. Since Grace is in both classes and she's here, then she just gets an advantage, which is fine. But I want to show you an example real quick of and these files take too long to open up. So just here it comes. All right. Okay, this is an example right here of a model where France has the absolute advantage in both soybeans and wheat, right? Do you see that? They can produce more than Poland for both, can't they? Right?
Yeah.
Well, when we actually, I'm not sure if I did this or not. No, this is just something I'm working on, so that's going to be confusing. So that's okay. But when we look at this, if you just think real quick, without spending a lot of time on it, the ratio right here is Poland has to give up 2 soybeans for every 1 wheat, right? Does everyone see that? 2 to 1, right? Does anybody not see that? For Poland, one unit of wheat cost 2 units of soybeans. Okay. For France, 1 unit of wheat cost. Okay. Now I'm going to get 75 to 100. That's one costs like 1 1/3 or something, or one. I'd have to do. Let's see. That'd be 50 divided by 20. And just make sure my head's working right here. So what you do is you divide 50. You divide this number by this number, and you get the cost of wheat. Okay. So if we divide 100 by 75, the cost is lower. Right, but so that means that France has the comparative advantage in producing wheat, but Poland has the comparative advantage in producing soybeans, because if you divide 25 by 50, you get 1/2, which means that 1 soybean costs 1/2. And for France, we simply divide 100 by 75, and you'll see that it cost, did I do that right? I don't know if I did that right. 100 by 75, 50 by 20. Let me do it again. 50. No, I did, sorry. I did it backwards. 25 divided by, I'm trying to hurry here, so my brain, okay, that's 1/2. So then if we divide 75 by 100, we're going to get something higher, right? So it's higher. So you see where this is a case where France has the absolute advantage in both, but even though Poland has the comparative advantage in soybeans, and France has the comparative advantage in wheat, because we're looking at opportunity costs. We're looking at the ratio, what they would have to give up in one to produce the other. Okay, does that make sense? Or are you guys confused? It's okay to be confused. This is confusing. I'm hearing. Tell me if you say something. Did you understand what I just did, or did I go too quickly, or do you not care? Something.
I understand.
Okay. Okay. It's just a ratio. All you're thinking about it is, what does Poland have to, if they produce one more unit of a wheat, how many units of soybean are they going to have to give up? Two, right? Because 50, so it's just that. And sometimes if the numbers aren't easy and your brain's not working like mine right now, you have to just divide it just to make sure that you don't think wrong. Okay. That's. But so that's the a difference between absolute advantage and comparative advantage. Okay. Just remember that you can easily. Where am I here? I hope I'm back where I'm supposed to. So you can easily, a country can easily have an absolute advantage in both, but it is impossible to have a comparative advantage in both. One's going to have one and one's going to have it in the other. Okay, now, in the problem, you're given a trade scenario, okay? You're saying that 1 bushel of wheat is going to be exchanged for 2 yards of cloth. So it's 1 wheat for 2 cloth. So that's what you're given. And then when you come back to your problem, whoops, wrong one. And you think about that. So first we say, well, what does wheat cost before trade? Well, before trade is simply what the opportunity cost is. So for a country A, one unit of wheat costs 1 unit of cloth, and for country B, 1 unit of wheat costs 3 units of cloth. So that's what we already computed when we computed. So whatever you compute for opportunity cost is your before trade, before when they just produce domestically, what it would cost them if they produce more of one or the other good. And we've already figured that out, so we just put that right here to compare. And the problem says that we're going to exchange 1 unit of wheat for 2 units of cloth. So we can easily see that country A is worse off because it's going to cost them more. 2 is more than 1. But country B is better off if they export cloth and only have to export 2 units of cloth versus 3 if they just produce domestically. So they're going to get wheat for less cloth if they trade than if they don't. So they're going to gain by exporting cloth and importing wheat. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You're just comparing. Just to remember, before trade is simply the opportunity cost that you've already figured out up here, and then after trade is going to be whatever the problem says. I keep going the wrong thing. Whatever the problem gives you. In this case, is 1 unit of wheat for 2 units of cloth. And in some of these problems, depending on what they give you right here, you will determine that it's beneficial for both countries to trade. It might be beneficial for only one to trade, and it might not be beneficial for either to trade, depending on what they say the terms of trade are. Okay. So does that, and that pretty much, now do you guys feel pretty comfortable that you can answer number 2?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, keep in mind that you're going to see different variations of these problems. It's not always going to be just simply they can produce 100 units of wheat. Sometimes they'll say that it'll be in terms of 100 workers can produce, 1 unit in France, and it takes 200 workers in Portugal to produce the same amount. So you'll get different variations, and you'll have to think through and make sure the important thing is, guys, is that you just think about when you first start computing opportunity cost, that you standardize what you're using to compute a cost. Like here, I use 1 unit of wheat for both country A and B so that I can easily compare the comparative right here, right? If I use 1 in the 2 or 1 in 1.5 or something, it would be a lot harder. Okay, so make sure that you standardize this part so that you can easily see who has the comparative advantage. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here and start it again because this is the one for the recording or the video for problem 2, so we can keep it organized somewhat. So I'm going to stop it.